The NASCAR Xfinity Series return to Rockingham Speedway was action-packed, but wasn't without controversy and, of course, a post-race disqualification. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Happy Easter, y'all. To everyone who celebrates, hope you're having a beautiful day with friends, with family. I was able to step away for a few minutes because what off weekend? What holiday? See, I've been doing this long enough, it's become almost an addiction, I think. Like, if something big and dramatic happens on or off track, I get this nagging feeling in the back of my brain, and I can't get rid of it until I sit down, do a video, pour my thoughts into an episode like this. So I'm doing this video more for my sake than anything, for my own sanity. Yes, a lot happened this weekend at Rockingham Speedway. It was the first NASCAR National Series weekend at the Rock in 12 years. And the first time Xfinity had raced at Rockingham in 21 years. We're going to focus mainly on the Xfinity Series race yesterday. That was the headliner this week. Reports this morning say that over 20,000 fans attended the Xfinity Series race. The track reported a grandstand sellout earlier in the week. All great stuff. I want to talk in a moment about the future of Rockingham Speedway. Does this track have Cup Series racing in its near future? But first and foremost, I want to talk about some of the things that happened in that Xfinity Series race, because I think the fans that attended, and of course fans like me who watched at home on the CW, I think were treated to largely a great show. And I want to make a distinction because I know a couple weeks ago I came on here and did a midnight Xfinity Martinsville race review, and I railed against the etiquette in this series. I railed against the lack of racecraft many drivers showed. There were 14 cautions at Rockingham yesterday. 83 of the 250 plus laps were run under caution. A lot of yellow flags, a lot of spins, a lot of crashes, a couple of big late race pileups. But I want to make the distinction that just because Rockingham turned into an attrition race, a bit of a wreckfest towards the end, it wasn't for the same reasons that Martinsville, in my opinion, was an embarrassment. Martinsville was embarrassing because all of those wrecks were completely avoidable. Drivers sailing it in 3 car lengths too deep, intentionally trying to shove their competitors 2, 3, 4 lanes up out of the groove. Sammy Smith at the end of that race throwing caution to the wind, racing with reckless abandon and just blatantly wrecking Taylor Gray to try and get the trophy. Like, that was ugly. Rockingham, most of the spins, most of the accidents were different, especially at the end. Those 2 big pileups that a lot of folks were talking about, that was the result of a fuel mileage race. And yes, we can criticize some of these Xfinity Series teams for woefully miscalculating their fuel. Like, I mean, I felt bad that Ryan Sieg didn't win this race, but they ran out of gas under caution with 11 laps to go. Like, they weren't even close. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the CW at one point reported that Christian Eckes had been told he's good to go on fuel. He ran out and caused a huge stack up on a restart. A few other drivers ran out of gas later and caused caution. The point is, that's not on the drivers. It's not on the drivers themselves. They are told to go. You have a few laps to go. They are told to hit the gas, save what they can, but focus out front. The checkered flag is within your view. That's on the crew chiefs. That's on the teams, the engineers, for miscalculating the fuel, for putting their drivers in a bad position. So, yes, a lot of wrecks, a little ugly at times in the Rockingham race, especially towards the end. A lot of good equipment tore up, turned into an attrition race, if you will. But it was not embarrassing in the same way the lack of racecraft at Martinsville was embarrassing. So I came down hard on the Xfinity Series field a few weeks ago. I wanted to make that distinction that just because on paper Rockingham looked like an S show, it wasn't. At least not in the same way Martinsville was an embarrassment. That's just the take I wanted to clarify. A lot of fans, including myself, were very excited to watch Kasey Kahne return to NASCAR. He's had success at Rockingham years ago, but he hasn't raced in NASCAR in over 6 years, I believe. He's done some dirt stuff. He's not completely out of practice, but he's not readjusted to these race cars. Looked pretty good in the Rockingham test about a month ago. Qualified top 5 for this race in that HendrickCars.com sponsored Richard Childress Racing entry. Had speed, but unfortunately the result won't show it. I mean, he did battle back with no right front fender to finish top 15, so like all things considered, not a terrible day, but that was obviously a top 5 car, perhaps illegally so, we'll get to that in a moment. But he never really got to contend. Unfortunately, he was caught up in a crash pretty early on when the leaders were coming up on Legge. I tweeted this during the race, but unfortunately, the Legge NASCAR experience has been miserable thus far this season. She was thrown to the wolves at Phoenix, making her Cup Series debut, her first stock car race in years at a tough track in Phoenix, in the slowest car in the field. She spun out twice in the second spin, cost a top 10 driver a top 10 run. She made headlines for all the wrong reasons. So what's her next race? Rockingham, high speed, repaved, difficult track, tricky turn 1 and 2 especially. She failed to qualify for the race on speed. I think she set the 34th or 35th fastest lap, but because of owner's points provisionals, that bumped her from the field. She ends up buying out a Joey Gase seat. JJ Yaley yanked from the 53. They put Legge in the 53, put some of her sponsors all over the car. Money changes hands. It's happened before. Like, this isn't a new thing, and this isn't something that just Legge is done. Like, used to be pretty common, especially when you had 50 plus cars showing up every week. But still, it's not a good look when you have to literally buy your way in after failing to qualify organically. And then she's out there, off the pace, not woefully off the pace, but slower than most. Leaders come up on her. She squeezes Nick Sanchez a bit. And then William Sawalich just runs over her. And of course, Kasey Kahne gets collected. A lot of fans were really quick to pile on Legge, and I think my initial post was interpreted as me completely blaming her for the incident. I mean, she did just park it in the center of 1 and 2, right there close to the leader's racing groove. If you're that far off the pace, she shouldn't be in or anywhere near the preferred groove. My point, and I clarified this later, was that it was more of a lack of experience all around. William Sawalich has not been very good this year. I think he's outside the top 20 in points in a Joe Gibbs racing car. Like, that's pretty bad. He's really young, fresh out of the ARCA Menard series. Like, he showed a lack of awareness, not knowing that a much slower lapped car was coming up, maybe trying to hook the bottom a little better or maybe back out of it a little. You got to have some awareness when there's a slow lapped car coming up into your view. But then, of course, Legge, we know she's not an experienced NASCAR racer. If you're going to be that far off the pace, you need to be aware of where the race leader is, especially when they're coming up on you quick. And she didn't give a ton of room, even to the leader, Nick Sanchez. Most of the blame for the wreck itself falls on Sawalich for just driving through her, but Legge put herself in a very vulnerable position. Other slow lap cars all day, especially those with more experience, would have known to give the two race leaders, especially two young drivers, at least an extra half lane or so. I mean, she's right there in the preferred racing groove. Unfortunately, this whole incident took out Kasey Kahne. I think a lot of fans were very upset that this incident ruined Kasey Kahne's competitive opportunity. And as far as Legge is concerned, yeah, she's obviously overmatched at the ovals right now. I mean, she's not getting into good cars. I think we also have to be honest about that. The cars she's driving, the 78 Cup, the 53 Xfinity, those aren't great cars, not the best equipment, but it would have done her better to make her debut at road courses. She's a sports car racer, IndyCar. She's got a lot of road course experience. I think she actually would be fairly competitive at road courses, but her first two NASCAR starts of the year have come at two extremely tricky, shorter ovals. And unfortunately, she's been unable to get out of harm's way. So I think her next race is, Talladega. It's Talladega next week. And then Texas. Why did I think she had I thought she was doing a road course sooner. Her next road course race isn't until Mexico City Cup Series. That's not for another almost 2 months. I didn't realize she was doing Talladega, Texas. She's going to run the Xfinity race at Charlotte. She's going to run Nashville. Texas and Charlotte. I mean, Texas is the sketchiest mile and a half outside of Atlanta on the schedule right now. I mean, sponsors seem to be driving this at this point, but boy, they are just driving her into harm's way is the way it feels. Anyway, I'll get off of that, move off from Legge again. It's been a miserable start to the year, continues to generate conversation for all the wrong reasons, but we'll move on because there are more interesting things to talk about. Let's talk about the eventual race winner, or at least who crossed the line first, young Jesse Love. Jesse Love was the show all day, making huge 3-wide moves on restarts. There was a moment, I think, in the first half where he just shipped it around the outside through turns 1 and 2, had guys like Eckes, I think it was Retzloff in the middle. They both had to correct it, and Love is skimming the outside while hanging it out, making that pass. It was exciting. Jesse Love was the show all day long. He moved Sammy Smith on the final overtime restart to get the win. Sammy said it was good hard racing, and I think that's the right answer if you're Sammy Smith. Smith, after what you pulled at Martinsville to try and win that race a few weeks ago, you got to let this one go. Good answer, Sammy Smith. Someone has been media trained in the past couple of weeks, but Jesse Love crossed the line first. Good for him. Best car all day. Was the show all day. Looked like his first non-super speedway win of his Xfinity Series career, but sadly, as we found out hours later, Jesse is still not beating the super speedway merchant allegations. NASCAR announced that the number 2 team has been disqualified for violating rule which says that all mating surfaces between the truck trailing arm and the U-bolt saddle must be in complete contact with each other. I guess they weren't in complete contact with each other. Bob Pockris, Fox Sports, tweeted out the actual excerpt from the rulebook that says spacer/pinion angle shims must have single planar mating surfaces. So it's not clear, obviously, exactly what RCR allegedly did here to get disqualified. They have the right to appeal. They might appeal. Apparently, the 2 cars being taken back to the NASCAR R&D Center for further inspection. But based on how I understand this, the team was playing with the back end, trying to get a little bit of skew, a little bit of sway, to get a little more side force on the car to get the car to turn a little bit better. Remember, a couple of years ago, NASCAR changed the Xfinity Series rules, moved some pieces around in the back to try and get some of that skew out of the car. So there's less air hitting the right rear quarter panel. I guess RCR was trying to play as far as they could within that gray area, and maybe they strayed too far. Maybe they can argue that natural wear and tear from the race itself or damage caused the infraction. We'll see if they choose to appeal. I feel like Richard Childress Racing is usually pretty defiant when they get caught doing something, or at least get in trouble for doing something. I feel like the immediate instinct from RCR is to dig their heels in and say, no, we did nothing. We're going to fight this tooth and nail. Not sure if they have any real chance at succeeding should they choose to appeal this, but it's a bummer nonetheless that NASCAR's great triumphant return to Rockingham would be marred by a disqualification, a new winner being slotted into that spot in the middle of the night. That's a bummer. I mean, congratulations, I guess, to Sammy Smith, who finished second on Saturday afternoon, but is now credited with the win. Welcome to the playoffs, Sammy Smith. Suddenly that 50-point penalty from Martinsville doesn't sting so bad. Sometimes this is just how the cookie crumbles, like Sammy Smith deserved payback to some degree for what he did at Martinsville a few weeks ago. Jesse Love attempted to give him some honest, fair payback here, and then he gets disqualified anyways, and Sammy Smith gets the trophy. So the payback backfired in this case. Bummer for Jesse Love. I think Jesse Love is really good. According to this post last night from Connor Zilich, it seems like Jesse is taking the bad news pretty well. Congrats to Sammy Smith. He's in the playoffs. A couple other quick shout outs while I'm talking results. Alpha Prime Racing. Parker Retzlaff qualified on the front row, gets a top 5 finish. So does my boy Brennan Poole. Second top 5 of the year. This is becoming a regular occurrence. Goodness gracious, let the celebrations continue. Also a top 5 for Harrison Burton AM Racing, a team that struggled mightily last year with their other drivers. Harrison getting them a top 5 this weekend. That's pretty freaking awesome. But yeah, Alpha Prime Racing, outside of the battle for the win, Retzlaff and Poole really shined bright on Saturday afternoon. Final thoughts, I guess. Rockingham was a lot of fun this weekend. And again, I wasn't there in person. I've been to a lot of these firsts in recent years. I was at the first Coliseum race. I was at the first Chicago Street race. I went to the first North Wilkesboro race when North Wilkesboro was revamped and revitalized. I was not at Rockingham this weekend, but a lot of people I know were there. Fans I saw posting on social media seemed to be having a blast. A lot of people seemed to praise the genuine old school classic feel the entire weekend had. Seemed like a great venue, honestly, for a truck ARCA Xfinity Series weekend. I think those 3 series should all return next year in the springtime. Not sure if it should fall in the exact same weekend. I think trying to align it with Easter weekend is a smart move. Easter moves around year to year. I don't even know when Easter's supposed to be next season. So, but regardless, I think having ARCA trucks and Xfinity back at Rockingham is a no-brainer based on how they performed, based on the fan response. Crowd looked great on TV for both Friday and Saturday, but fans naturally want to know about the Cup Series. We talked about it earlier in the week. Ben Kennedy, NASCAR vice president, said, hey, we want to watch how this track does for a couple of years, see how the Xfinity or Truck Series goes, and then we'll consider maybe bringing a Cup Series race there. And I still think that's the right strategy, because as fun as yesterday's Xfinity Series race was, before all the fuel mileage mayhem, the next gen car would not put on that kind of a show. That track is still pretty freshly repaved. There were two pretty distinct grooves, but the actual racing surface was fairly narrow. Darlington has two racing grooves, but it's all pretty narrow, and we saw dirty air play a huge role in that cup race a few weeks back. The next gen car is unbelievably susceptible to invisible forces like dirty air. I saw Xfinity drivers able to go right up to people's bumper, get them loose like it was 1998, wiggle them up off the bottom, race door to door down the straightaway. That was the most throwback part of the whole weekend, frankly, was seeing drivers actually get right up to their bumper, loosen someone up with little to no contact. You can't do that in the Cup Series car. You just can't. The tires are too wide, too much grip. You aren't going to get the guy loose. You're not even going to get close enough to the guy to get him loose because the air bubble is going to be too much to overcome. The next gen car is so damn sensitive in dirty air. It's not putting on that race at Rockingham Speedway. It's not putting on anything remotely close to what we saw yesterday. So I think it's unfortunate. It's sad. It's another glaring reminder that NASCAR has a real issue with how the next-gen car was designed. Next-gen 2.0, the blueprint should already be started. But in the here and now, in the short term, I think we should not rush to bring the Cup Series to Rockingham Speedway. Maybe that's me throwing cold water on the whole weekend. Maybe I'm being a wet blanket. I don't mean to be. I'm being brutally honest. The car would not put on at nearly as good of a show as the Xfinity car or even the truck did for the most part Friday and Saturday. Now, if we continue to make some tweaks to the next gen, the tire, or as the Rockingham surface wears a bit more, and it will, it's going to bake under that North Carolina sun, maybe in a couple of years, 2-3 years, kind of like Ben Kennedy suggested, maybe then I could see the Cup Series work Rockingham into their East Coast rotation. Maybe some years you don't do North Wilkesboro, or maybe Wilkesboro ends up being a points date at one point, and you can bring the Cup cars to Rockingham for the All-Star race, or maybe the Rock lands the Clash at some point. I mean, I think there's a real opportunity to fit Rockingham into that sort of grassroots trifecta that is Wilkesboro, Bowman Gray, Rock. I don't know that there's a place for all three of those tracks on the Cup schedule every single year, but like you could do 2 out of 3, or rotate between years, between dates, between exhibitions. As the track ages, the surface wears, the groove hopefully widens as NASCAR hopefully continues to evolve the next gen car. I think there's a real opportunity to bring the Cup Series back to Rockingham. I just don't want us to rush. I think the Xfinity Series, by and large, put on a solid show. We need to be realistic, though. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done to the Cup Series car before we can expect a great race at a place like Rockingham Speedway. It's unfortunate, but it's where we are. It's the sad reality of our situation. I guess that's all I have to say about this weekend's Rockingham Speedway race. All right, that little fizzle in the back of my head is finally starting to go away. I've said what I wanted to say. I still think it's unbelievable, frankly, that Rockingham landed a major NASCAR weekend this soon. I was at the facility a little less than 2 years ago, got a tour of the place. They had just repaved it. They had just done some work on the new safer barriers. They were in the process of tearing down grandstands in turns 1 and 2. Clearly, they were going through the motions necessary to get Major League Racing back. But after talking to the owner and just looking around, frankly, I thought their attention was diverted elsewhere. I thought they were more focused on other kinds of events that could be put on at Rockingham. They didn't seem to think NASCAR even was a super realistic option. But hey, things happen fast, and I'm glad that fans in North Carolina and their surrounding areas were treated to a legitimate throwback race weekend of sorts that maybe will become a permanent part of the NASCAR schedule going forward once again. But those are just my final thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What you make of The Rock and its NASCAR return. Have a very happy Easter. Again, all of you have a great rest of your weekend. We'll be back at it Monday through Friday, getting you ready for Talladega weekend. That's next. Thanks for watching, folks. Talk to you again soon.